The steam explosion near Chillicothe, Ohio in 1948 is one of the most dramatic accidents in the history of American railroads. The frightening photographs of twisted metal and long boiler tubes sticking out like wires have made the event famous among historians. But behind those images lies a simple story. A story about powerful machines, human decisions, and how small problems can grow into disaster. So, how could something like this happen? Well, to understand that, we have to go back to the beginning. In the first half of the 20th century, steam locomotives were the backbone of transportation in the United States. These machines were enormous, heavy, and incredibly powerful, but they also required constant attention and skill to operate safely. With that in mind, the locomotive in question, a Chesapeake and Ohio Railway freight engine, a large steam locomotive known as the T1 class, it was designed to pull coal and operate under high pressure for very long periods. And it was massive. Some reports mention that it could weigh up to 1 million pounds when fully loaded. Yet, surprisingly, the way it worked sounds simple. Basically, a steam locomotive worked by heating water inside a sealed boiler. As that water turned to steam, the pressure drove pistons and turned wheels. But here's the thing. It all relied on one very important condition. There always had to be enough water inside the boiler. In addition to its use for steam, the water also cooled the hot metal surfaces. 2 crew members were required for this control of balance. There was the engineer, who operated the locomotive, and then there was the fireman, who managed the fire as well as the water supply. If the water were to drop too low, the metal above the fire could overheat the entire structure, dangerously so. And that brings us back to May the 12th, 1948, when the locomotive in question was pulling a freight train. The crew on board had probably done this kind of work many times before, so nothing really seemed unusual at first. However, unfortunately, they let their water level run too low, and when more was ultimately added, the overheated steel caused a dangerous chain reaction to occur. The superheated metal turned that incoming water into steam, and the steam expanded rapidly, over 1,000 times its liquid volume, meaning that this pressure rise was far faster than what the boiler could handle, and the metal, being in this now weakened state, couldn't hold. The resulting pressure surge was far more than the structure could withstand, and so an explosion happened suddenly and violently. Witnesses later describe the massive blast. The force tore apart the boiler, launching pieces of steel machinery outward. The front of the locomotive was shredded, and the long superheated tubes inside the boiler burst outward, creating that strange, spaghetti-like appearance seen in surviving photographs. And it needs to be emphasized now that the energy released in a boiler explosion is extraordinary. A steam boiler stores immense pressure, and when it fails, the release of all that energy happens in a fraction of a second. So, as you might imagine, the crew on board had almost no chance for survival. Historical accounts report that the engineer, firemen, and front brakemen were killed by the scalding water as well as the steam. The train itself was destroyed at the front, though parts of it remained on the rails. Nearby people reportedly heard the blast from a distance. One man, who knew the timetable of the rail line, headed a mile up track to flag down an oncoming train and warn it about the situation. Apparently, the blast was so powerful that it knocked over furniture in nearby homes. The photographs taken after the accident show that boiler ripped open, and it looks almost unreal. The twisted metal, torn piping, and debris covering the entire area. In the aftermath, investigators concluded that the low water level inside the boiler is what caused the overheating, which then triggered that catastrophic surge, and the rest is history. But there's one important thing we need to talk about for the railroad. The losses were serious. 3 crew members were killed. A powerful freight locomotive was destroyed. And this is probably the most consequential part. Confidence in steam technology was shaken. Steam locomotives had already begun their decline in the late 1940s. Diesel engines were becoming more common because they required less maintenance and simply they were easier and safer to operate, meaning accidents like this reinforced the idea that steam technology, while powerful, carried serious risk. Hence, within a few years, the railway began retiring many of its locomotives in favor for diesel. Today, this event is remembered partly because of the haunting photographs that were left behind, but also because, in many ways, it was the final nail in the coffin of steam locomotives. Some people have even dubbed this the Hindenburg of the rails. But we'll leave that story for another time. We'll leave it there for today. All right, I got through somehow. We're doing this live, guys, because my editor couldn't finish this week's episode in time, and so we try something new. I tried to hold it together. Anyways, until next time, this is Ryan Sokesh signing off. I hope that you liked that video, even though it was a little bit raw. See ya.